Welcome, everybody, to the Venus Report podcast. This is Astrology Unhinged,
where two sisters riff on all things esoteric and talk through how we can integrate the wisdom of astrology into our lives.
I'm Kate. I'm a yoga practitioner, a somatic educator, artist, and entrepreneur.
And my name is Liz. I'm a freelance content and music producer, seasonal wellness small business owner, and studying herbalist.
Awesome. If you haven't listened before, welcome back. My name is Kate. This is Liz. We already said that. But today we're going to get into the houses, and we're going to talk astrology and all about the houses.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we will probably pin this episode so that you can go back and listen to it and just educate yourself on just some insight on the houses. But yeah, I think we're going to get started with Kate on the first house, and we're going to just go back and forth and talk about kind of each of our experiences with the houses and our personal experiences just living through them.
Yeah. So as some of you might know, some of you may not know, those of who are new to astrology, we wanted to do this intro episode just to kind of like teach you the outline of the birth chart. So in the birth chart, there are 12 houses, and each house has a ruling sign and a ruling planet, which we might get into a little later. But the 12 houses represent the areas of the sky, like different areas of space. And it is said that these areas represent areas of your life. And anything can kind of fit, anything that you can think of can fit into one of the 12 houses or multiple. Mm-hmm. So the houses really are amazing, and I love learning about which planets are in each house. So we're just going to go ahead and get started with the first house. And if you were to look at a pie chart, you can picture like the chart divided into 12 pieces. And the first house sits right below the horizon. This one represents Aries. So the first house also represents the first sign of the zodiac. And the first house is said to represent the body image, your appearance, and your life force. So those three things I think are really important for the first house. Mm-hmm. I think of like your vital energy, your prana, how you run energy through your system. That's very first house. Also, if you have planets in the first house, they come alive the most in your experience. So, for example, I think of Liz, she has Pluto in the first house. And this can come out and manifest in so many different ways, but Pluto is such a depth of a planet and represents transformation and big tectonic shifts. So the way that Liz experiences her life, or maybe the way people see Liz, is like reflecting this big transformational energy.
Yeah.
So that's how I think of the first house. What do you think?
So yeah, I agree. And I will just give a little like wrap of kind of the way that I interpret the houses as well. So like when I think about the houses, and when you think about astrology in general, a really easy way that you can get into it is by really, really associating every zodiac sign with the houses and the planet, so that everything that has to do with either three of those, the house, the planet, the zodiac sign, will always be associated with these things. And yes, we tend to associate the house with more of an experience that's not kind of inside of you, but that doesn't mean to say that it can't happen inside of you. So when I think of the first house, it is Aries, it is Mars, it is all about will and like severing and action and motivation, but also leadership and warrior tendencies and things that you feel willful about, the way that you go about standing up for somebody. Like that's all I take into, like, even just like the little descriptive adjectives of an Aries, I also associate with the first house. So saying that, how Kate explained my Pluto placement in the first house, I think it also is a little bit amplified because I have Scorpio ruling the first house, and that's also a Mars ruled sign in ancient astrology. So I think when you have Mars ruling anything in the chart, or just anything that has to do with Mars, it's gonna come off a little bit fiery, a little bit intense. And when we're talking about the first house, whatever you have ruling that can definitely come off intense. And that, I think, is the reason why most people say your first house, meaning your ascendant ruler, what's on the eastern horizon when you're born, is the place in the sky that actually is like the genre of your life. And I think the reason being for that is because it has that fiery intention, and it's willful. It's meaning to like lead you. Aries and Mars, but I would say Aries, just in terms of what I'm about to say here, is a cardinal sign. So it's like the willingness to like push yourself and like be yourself and self actualize is very present in this house. So everything that has to do with the genre of your perception,
Mm.
the will that you carry, and how that shows up to other people is probably the biggest thing about the first house. And I would also like to say that, like, somebody might think that you are a Cancer when Cancer actually just rules your first house or something. You know what I mean? Sometimes people can interpret you as a sun sign of your rising sign because the first house comes off so strong. So,
I love that description. I think of individuation as a big word that came up for me too in the first house. So all this to say, when we're talking through these houses, you can, if you know your birth chart, picture the planets that are in each house, and the planets kind of express their energy in that flavor of the house that they're in.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, Liz, what do you think of the second house? Let's just go to the second house.
Yes. Okay, so we're on to the second house. This is Taurus ruled. This is fixed earth, which I also like to implement some of the qualities and the elements into this as well, just to get yourself situated if certain things speak to you in that language. So this is all about the values we hold in life. And that obviously expands into material things, so luxury things, what we own. Like, I guess also I would associate this axis, meaning the second house and the eighth house, as like investments too, like what you find so much value in that you're willing to invest in it. So like, I guess I wouldn't say homes just because that is more fourth house, but like things that really hold a lot of value to you. And it doesn't need to only be material things. I guess I'm a little bit like, this is how I always see this house, is just like the material, but I would like to hear kind of like the other sides of what you would interpret this as.
Yeah. I think with the second house, I always think of values. I always think of values. And for me, like my values are like spirituality, freedom, like financial freedom. So that stuff innately goes into the second house for me. And the second house is Taurus. So it's money. It's all about money. Like it's finances, it's money, it's assets, and it's what you invest in, like your wealth, like your net worth, like that kind of shit, which
Yeah.
like is kind of like foreign to me. I'm not like, I know my net worth, but like that's also I have Saturn in the second house. So I'm like learning a lot of lessons in this life about like my money, my finances, how I manage them, and like how I build them and like be financially stable. Stability is a big one in the second house. Because if you
Yes.
think about it, like you're on this journey from the first house to the 12th house. The 12th house is all about like the integration of wisdom, and we'll talk about that. But in this like baby energy of like the first to the second, you know what I mean? Like the second house is very much like after we've individualized and like we've come into our body, it's very much like body. And then the
Yes.
second house is like, all right, what do I value? Like, what am I doing in this life? Like, what am I
Like,
moving toward? You
yes,
know?
and like defining those things. And I love that you actually said that, because that's another way that I love to interpret the houses as well as everything else. As I said, I kind of associate them with all of the things. So, like
Yeah.
when you're thinking about it, think about as you were youthful, how you went about this journey of self-actualizing, then what? Then what would you do once you knew yourself, or once you knew what kind of like you knew what direction you wanted to go in? What was your next course of action? It was probably something earth based. You probably made a plan to um, like build a sandbox in your yard because you wanted to just get dirty, like things like that. I know that that's very literal and that's probably not even a real life example, but things that like quite literally go along the timeline of your life also, I find
Yeah.
very, very beneficial. And yeah, like spring is birth, so then we're heading into summer
Yes.
is like your youth, right? And then we get into fall, and then it's winter and death.
hmm I I really enjoy thinking of the birth chart again, like just a little more of an overview of like the first house is like you're so young, like that's the beginning of your life. You're born. Aries is like the beginning, and then as you make the journey, you become wiser, and it's just like yeah, it's like when you look at the chart, the bottom of the chart represents like your home life and your like develop your childhood development. And then the top of the chart from the seventh house to the 12th, the top of the half of the circle is more like how you outwardly express yourself in this life and like your career and like you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so yeah. So I think the second house also I wrote down your nest egg, like your like feeling of comfort in what you have and your self-talk, how you talk
Mm,
to yourself is very second house.
yeah,
Um,
I agree.
yeah.
I would say, I guess I would say, another way, and this all just goes into interpreting the houses too. So sorry if it seems like we keep giving overviews, but it's very all connected.
It's
So
all connected.
yeah. So when we talk about the first house, we're also talking about the seventh house. So when you are relating it to the opposite of what that could be, that means the other. That means like what you might think of as your resources in others, right? So it's like it's also it could even like show up in like relationships, like what you invest in like other people, and just like the other when it comes to your values, I would say is another aspect of the second house that helps me understand it.
That's also, I wanted to put in there that when we talk about houses and the reason why Liz was saying she also thinks about the eighth house when she thinks of the second house is because they're on axes. And there's always an opposite house because it's a circle. So when you think of the second, you think of the eighth, the third, the ninth, the fourth, the 10th. So there's always an opposite. And in astrology, we're working a lot with like duality and the energy of non-binary. So like looking at the binary, but seeing how we can get into the middle and the middle path. So when we're talking about the second house and all the things that go along with that, we are also talking about the opposite or the axes, which is very much related to our values, but it's more of like an outward facing, right? It's like who we collaborate with, people that, how we get grants and how we get loans is very much eighth house.
Mm.
So let's move on to the third house.
Yes, and I
Sound
think
good?
it's you start with the third house.
So the third house to me is, right, it's Gemini energy. So it's still very young, but now we're getting into more of like how we communicate and how we think, how our cognition works, how our brainstem talks to our frontal lobe, like this kind of stuff. And Gemini is all about communication, again, Mercury. How we think has to do with our siblings, sisters, brothers, siblings, like close family, and the relationship dynamics between those people. How we think, how we relate, how we look at our experiences from like an outside view and talk about them, process them with partners, siblings,
Mm.
family. I also have heard this house explained as goddess energy, which I thought I needed to put that in there because I love that.
Oh,
And friends, right? Friends. It also can mean like your daily rituals where you clear your mind, your rituals where you like get clear on what your intention is for your day, for example. So it's very much like representing all that is Mercurian, which I mean by that like communicative. cerebral. It's an air sign, so it's how you think. Like think about thoughts popping in and out of your brain. Very airy. Like
Mm-hmm.
Gemini is also the sign of the twins, which is the third house. Like think of like you have these two dualities at play in your mind all the time. It can represent the female and male binary. It can represent binaries in general, like opposites, and how we're integrating those. And I think nowadays there's this big movement towards like non-binary thinking and being in this the both and of everything. And I see Gemini energy in third house representing all of that, all of the ways in which we elevate our consciousness through noticing our thoughts. I feel like meditation is very third house, like watching your thoughts go by without attachment.
Yeah.
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 How
I
about
I think you explained that like completely accurately. The third house, I feel like has always been a bit of a like it's always been a little bit hard for me to interpret it, but because I do have some Gemini in my chart, I would definitely associate. I do find the general day to day experiences and like even like your immediate environment, anything in your immediate environment, I would say is definitely like third house. So that means like I would say the coolest way to that I've heard about the coolest way that I would think of the third house is also a weird kind of a weird like way to go about it, but there's a thing in astrology called horary charts, and you can pull. It's basically we won't get into this. This is a bit advanced, but it's like you would pull a chart if you lost something, or if like you were looking for something and you wanted to know what kind of thing, where would it be, and interpret it through astrology to find it. And I would say like this would be the most interesting placement of say like you lost your keys to your car. That's very Mercury, right? So if Mercury was in the third house in a horary chart, you'd be like, oh well, it's in my immediate environment. I have to find it somewhere in here. You know what I mean? Like it would have to do with your environment, the thing that
Wow.
you lost, and kind of like interpreting it in a way that like makes literal sense, but also very conceptual. So yeah, I would say it's like your environment and how, like, meaning like your environment, the environment of your mind, the environment of your place, the environment of where you live, the environment of your neighborhood, all of that is very third house.
So, okay, with the horary, I've never heard that before, the horary
Really?
astrology. So, do you look up the chart of when you lost the thing?
So yeah, I don't know much about it actually. I think it's more like yeah, you look up the chart of where and when you lost it, and then it would give way to
Oh,
like where you can find it.
that's so interesting.
I know.
That is so cool. It's like kind of doing like a chart of something's lost. Like I've heard of people doing death charts where it's like you do the chart of the moment something has passed and you can see what their afterlife will look like and like what they're
Right.
working through, which is so interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Fourth house?
So we are on to the fourth house. The fourth house is Cancer rules, which I am very familiar with. I'm a Cancer sun and moon. So the fourth house, I would say, is representative of security. Like we said with the second house, I would say it's security, stability, and your foundational awareness and how that where that comes from. So that's like your family line, um, even like heritage, things of the past. I would say like history and how it has made you or how it has gotten you here. I guess is like where I would go. I would go to the fourth house to look into anything that had to do with that. So I would say we're also talking about like a water sign that's cardinal. So this house can also be very like intuitively led, but also a bit like initiative. So I would say like the home, the fourth house and the home and the heart of the home, like that's something that I would say is predominant here, but it has like a taste of just like making way and like being the precipice of a beginning to a
Mm.
different like to a different time or a different like a different
Ooh,
chapter at least, because
yeah.
it is the first cardinal, it is the second cardinal sign that we've gone through this far. So it's like we've already done like the cardinal spring, now we're in the cardinal summer, and we're also at the solstice, which is like the highest point of the sun until it will start to go back down. So it's, I think it's, I would say as much as it is about the home, it's also about your foundational security and like initiating yourself into that, that doesn't have to do with what has been given to you already from your family or from history or that. And I don't know
Mm.
how well that makes sense, but I think if we're talking about the journey, say you're born at Aries, you're born in the first house, and you're making your way to through all the houses. The fourth house is where you would start to like build your own sense of security and stability from
Mm.
where you come from your
Mm.
foundational like upbringing.
Yeah. I love, I really like that interpretation. I think of, yes, ancestry, the home, your lineage, where you come from, fourth house, so fourth house. And when you think of it, the fourth house is the IC point, so the very bottom of the chart, which is the ilium coli, which in Latin just means like the bottom of the sky. So in kind of Buddhism based astrology, the IC is kind of talking about like how you feel mentally well, like your mental health. So where you come from and all of the genetic stuff that comes with like your lineage and your ancestry, how that manifests in this world and how you can have security in yourself with all that shit that you carry in your cells, because we all do. And the IC is like a point of safety. It's a point of like, where can I be at home in myself, in the fourth house? How can I like build a beautiful foundation for me to bloom into the MC, like into the top of the chart? That I
Mm-hmm.
love that interpretation. Tradition, your home, your parents, very fourth house.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fourth, like for some reason, the third, fourth, and fifth houses are like seem to elude me a lot. Do you feel
Mm,
like that? I don't know
no,
why.
I feel like it's like the first, well, the third house always, yeah, I guess no, but there's certain houses that do elude me. Definitely.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I wrote epigenetics. That's like a big one. So like what you carry in your cellular structure can be represented by your fourth house. And I think like a little example of that could be like if you have Mars in the fourth house, you may carry a lot of anger, aggression through your lineage, through like what has happened in your family history in the past. Maybe you don't even know about it, but there's this like cellular structure of anger and reactivity, and fighting perhaps, or it could represent differently, but that could be a really prime example of like Mars in the fourth house and
Mm,
how that manifests in your life.
yeah.
Yeah, I have Aries ruling my fourth house, which to me, yeah, we've talked about this before, but to me, like, I feel like this sense of action is held in my cellular structure. Like, there's like, I feel really called to take actions on things that feel a certain way to me. And
Hmm.
I don't know, maybe that could have to do with the fourth house.
Yeah, I also think it could have to do with you have Mars in Cancer, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's like double that.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right. So that's called a mutual reception, I believe.
Mm, okay, yeah.
When you have, yeah, when you have like the sign in the house and then the
or the
planet
planet.
that represents the sign in that
Yeah.
house. We'll talk about that eventually.
Yeah.
Okay, fifth house. So we're towards like 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're at the fifth house. The fifth house is Leo energy. It's creativity. I love this one. It's fun. It's pleasure. It's feeling your body. Integration is a big one with this one because integration happens when we feel pleasure and play and fun. Leo is about strength, creativity, being in our like heart space. Represents the heart very much so. It also is said to represent children, and I think that is because the heart is so representative in this house that
Mm.
your children represent your heart, right, in your home, and like the energy of fun and play. But I think like as adults, when we study astrology, like we can look at our fifth house to see where and how we can like tune into the energy of play and how we can like truly enjoy ourselves and have fun. I think a lot of this culture, like a lot of culture nowadays is focused on like, okay, let's go have fun. Let's get shit faced and like have fun. If you can't see the video, I'm doing quotation marks right now. Because we are so deprived of like this like pleasurable feeling of like flow and like erotic energy even. Like it doesn't have to be sexual, but like the fifth house can be sexual. But I think we have it wrong in society when we're like trying to have fun and we're trying to like tune into that play and we are killing our bodies with like all this alcohol and these substances and all this stuff. So I think like we as a species have a lot to learn from the fifth house, from Leo energy, from strength and courage and play, romance, pleasure, creative flow, and
Mm-hmm.
how we can build that into our lives. I have been like really discovering my fifth house energy and like what a creative, pleasurable flow feels like in my day to day. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not without talking about our day to day like rituals because the sixth house is all about that. So we're on our way there in the fifth house.
Mm-hmm.
So for me personally, the fifth house is like really important and it speaks to how we can build like a creative flow in our businesses that feels like easeful. It doesn't have to feel hard. Like things don't always have to feel hard.
Yeah.
Like that, like that's all I'll say.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, yes, I love that interpretation. I again feel like I don't have much to say, but I would also point out that the fifth house is the exaltation of um, well, no, I won't say that. I'll say that in my chart because I have Pisces ruling the fifth chart or the fifth house. Sorry, Pisces ruling the fifth
Mm.
house. So it's like Venus is there this month. Saturn will be there next month. It's a lot of action there. So I feel like I might have maybe I would interpret this different in a month, but uh,
Mm.
it's a place of I think it was interpreted as um, the joy of Venus. Actually, I think it's
Ooh.
joy of
Yes.
in the fifth house. I'm not positive. That's why we're calling this astrology unhinged. But um, so I would say, yeah, the fifth house. I've found a lot of like themes to be yes around the element of play. And speaking from somebody who has Saturn here, um, this is a bit like I I find that I definitely have a hard time with like not I definitely just have always had boundaries when it came to like having fun or like I feel like I've always had limits and like I'm like okay this is enough though because there needs to be some discipline like I've just always had that sense of like there needs to be discipline here like just imagine Saturn in this kind of house like that it's not the greatest placement but I do think it teaches a lot of lessons in the terms of like how much play you need as a person and when you don't get that which I'm very used to it's like when you don't give yourself just like the free moments to like watch TV if you want. You know what I mean? Like just out of pure wanting to just have a night of watching TV. Like there were moments in my life where I would be like, I can't do that. You know what I mean? So it was like
Mm-hmm.
when you don't give in to fifth house matters, you'll notice it because it will start to affect like other placements, and I think just other places in your chart that have to do with like limiting your humanness. It's like
Mm.
this is a house of being in the human experience, I think, the most, which makes sense that it's the joy of Venus. It's the joy of sensing all the things in life, the material things, feeling everything around you. Like I think that that's a really good interpretation of it. But yeah, I wouldn't say much else here. I think that we covered that.
Um, well, one more thing, because I want to mention, because I know Liz's chart, she's going to be going through her Saturn return in the fifth house in Pisces. So this one I know will be big for you, and we can like keep tabs on how this feels because a lot of people your age, if you were born between, I don't know the exact dates, but 1993 to 94, 95, like if you have Saturn in Pisces, you will be going through your Saturn return soon, and Liz can speak to what that feels like in the fifth house, and I definitely think there's going to be some lessons around like boundaries, play, and how to set those boundaries, how to let go of those boundaries, and that like that sense of like I need to stop, or I go too far, and trusting yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that'll just be something we will probably talk about.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We'll talk about it again.
Yeah.
Um, cool. We're on to the sixth house. Okay. So the sixth house is the place of ruling or ruled by Virgo, Mercury, mutable Earth energy. Um, this is actually a placement that Kate and I both have the South Node. And the South Node is kind of like, in terms, I feel like Kate would explain it a little bit better, but the way I see it, it's kind of like what your life and what your soul is used to. So, the sixth house, I would say, is representative of your health, this like the status in your body and like the standing in your body. Um, I guess like the elements of the body that and the elements of the body that have wherewithal, so like that run down over time and like the labor intensiveness of life. But it also is representative of the day to day, the day to day work life. I would say like what you do with your life in terms of what you do every day for work. I would say is where the sixth house can be studied. And if you have also, when I say health too, it's like also watch here for like sickness and things that could ail your body. Or if you have, I've heard countless times of like just on podcasts and things like that, that when people have sixth house Saturn transits or sixth house transits that are a little bit challenging in some way, somebody will get sick or there'll be sickness. And speaking of, I probably sound a little sick, and I'm sorry, everyone. I was very sick a couple of days. Just want to point that out. But anyway, it's very enthemed. It's very enthemed with the sixth house. So yeah, I would say, and then when we talk, like when we're thinking about it, it's like Virgo. Virgo's way of actually to relate it back to the fifth house. Venus, I think what they say is in her detriment in Virgo. So when she's in her joy in the fifth house, or when she's in her joy, yes, in the fifth house. When she's in Virgo, for instance, when she's in Pisces, she's exalted, she's happy. When she's in her opposite, Virgo, she's in her detriment, or at her fall, actually. Um, so that's just another way that you can interpret the house and how things could actually play out. So it's like if Venus, the planet of um, love and joy and relation and feeling and sensual and values and the things that are the pleasurable things of life, if they're at their fall in the house of Virgo, you can probably also understand what the sixth house can also represent. Um, so I do think though that the value in the sixth house is learning discipline or learning ways to go about your day to day that fulfill you. I think um, like fulfillment is also maybe a theme that comes up when you're looking into the sixth house, because it is what you do every day. It's all about the things you do like over the course of your time. So yeah, I guess I would say that's my interpretation.
Mm. Yeah. I, I just went through a Mars transit through my sixth house because Mars was retrograde in Gemini for like a while this past year. And it just went direct. So I'm still experiencing a Mars transit through my sixth house. And I can say that I experienced so many different things when it came to my work schedule and like what I do on a day to day. So my schedule and my daily rituals, like my Google Cal, was
Mm,
like filled up and then emptied out and then shifted around so many different times when I had Mars transiting my sixth house. You can
wow.
see, yeah, you can see probably where if you have Mars in Gemini, or no, I'm sorry. If you have Gemini in the sixth house, you just also had a Mars transiting your sixth house. If you're a Capricorn rising, uh, but it can be with any planet transiting that house. Like my my organization totally shifted, and I felt like this need, this urge daily to organize my surroundings and my stuff in a way where I could like have more flow in my daily schedule. Like, and I did experience a lot of like flow, but then a lot of like disruption. And I was like, what is happening? What is my daily schedule going to look like in the
Mm,
future? I have no fucking idea. I don't, because Mars was just like, fuck you. I'm going to throw you all this random stuff. So that was my experience with Mars in the sixth house. The sixth house can also represent like, I already said schedule, your health, your pets. Pets is one I always hear about, like your little pets, the things that you take care of day to day, like your little friends that live in your home. And yeah, like the daily grind and like what you can do on a day to day basis that gets you to like a space of expansion. Like the daily schedule, the structure, very Virgo, structure, file cabinet energy that gets you
mhm.
towards the expansion and the subconscious reprogramming that you desire or all of this stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So after sixth house comes the seventh house. This one is opposite of the first. So we're coming kind of like full circle. The seventh house is all about relationships. It's ruled by Libra. It's as we're coming up. So there's a horizon. So the sixth house is right here. And then we're moving up above the horizon again in the seventh house. So this point is the descendant versus the ascendant, which is the first and 12. So we're coming up against the descendant, which I don't like actually know a ton about the descendant, but I know that it has to do with relationships. It's like the first house, the opposite of seventh is the me or the I. The seventh is the we. So it's the us, it's the our relationship, it's your contracts with other people. It's not just intimate relationships. It's how you it's like the contracts or like the agreements you have with others where okay, we're in an intimate relationship. Okay, we're in a business relationship. Okay, we are in this sort of relationship. It's like what comes about with all of those things. Committed committed partners, committed like clients is very seventh house. Yeah, and also like when you think of Libra, you also think of Venus. The kind of like the beauty and the aesthetic of Venus energy. Air also, air sign. So like when I think of the seventh house, I think of like the beauty that can come of relationships. And when you have a planet there, it can like represent what kind of flavor your relationships are to be the most soul fulfilling. That's how I see it, is like when you have a planet in the seventh, or you have a transit to the seventh, or you have an empty seventh house. What sign rules your seventh house? It's okay if you also have an empty house, because we all have them. Maybe some people don't. That would be crazy to have one planet in each house.
Right.
But a lot of the time, we have empty houses. That doesn't really mean, it doesn't mean that like you don't have that in your life. It just means that I think it could mean there's just like more flow there, and you just experience it as you go, and there's not like something influencing it constantly, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I think of the seventh. What do you think?
Yeah. I would say the seventh house also has to do with what's right. I would say, like, when I think of Libra, I'm also into the tarot, and I think of the judgment, or not judgment, sorry, justice. Um,
Mm,
so, like, even just with this, when we think about Libra and like the balance beam and how it's just like it's the first actual non-archetypal object of a representation of a zodiac sign too. And we're at the precipice of we're actually in cardinal energy again, so we're now getting into the fall season, and we're also making our way, like you said, at the descendant. So I feel like this is also a change of energy. So like how the first house was, like how the fourth house was, this is another switch up. um I think that it it is very concerned with the other. um and in terms of our storyline, I think we can say, this is how I make sense of it. The first six houses are very much personal. It's like how you have developed as a personal being, with what you value, with your environment, where you come from, what is your history, what do you do in your day to day. And now we're talking about how we actually relate to the outside world. So
mm,
Libra is like the balance of finding self and the other, and having justice, like having balance, and knowing what's right. And it's kind of like the airy comprehension of how you would relate to somebody else. Because when you think about like friendships and communication and things like that, when we're talking about Mercury, we're talking about Virgo and Gemini, which are earthy and airy. So it's like when you relate to things, it's very much a tangible experience as much as it's a mental experience. And when you're talking to some other, you're stimulating your mind, and you're also stimulating your own value system and who you are. So I feel like the
mm,
seventh house, as much as people say, and as much as it very much is the relationships you hold and like how that can show up, it's also very conceptual, and can be also a place where it can teach you a lot about your own sense of relating to yourself, and um, how your mind works in the outside world, I guess.
I love that. I love that. Um, there was something that you said, the archetypal energy. You said it's the first one without an archetypal. Do you mean like without like a human representation of an
Yeah,
archetype? It's
yeah.
like a
And then,
symbol.
yeah, like a human and or animal symbol. It's the
Yeah,
first one in the zodiac that doesn't have that.
cool. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's the sign of the scales. If we didn't say that before.
Mm-hmm.
Um, cool. Okay, so eighth house. So moving above the
House.
seventh to the eighth.
My favorite.
Yeah,
Um,
me too.
okay, so you're talking to two Scorpio girls here, so
Me
Scorpio,
too.
eighth house. So eighth house. Um, I feel like I have a bit of lived experience here, because I have a stellium in this house, um, meaning I have 4 planets in the 8th house, and they're all personal planets. So I guess like what I find here, and it's hard for me not to interpret it through a personal lens. I can interpret it through like what we know about it, which is like, okay, it's ruled by Scorpio, it's fixed, it's Pluto, it's the transformation and the depth, the things that are under the surface that we don't normally see, which is like when you think about the axis, we're on Taurus Scorpio axis. Taurus is the rose, roots is Scorpio and Pluto and the 8th house. So what also I find in this house is a very heavy emphasis on also the other. I would say it's a very direct correlation with the 7th house. But it's a bit more about your personal transformation in relating to somebody else based on your values. So it is like the conversations with your partner about money. Like if we're talking about like just down to the basics, how it can materialize literally, like that would be an 8th house thing, I guess. But then when you also think about decisions you make to invest in something, but then it happens to bring debt, or something was supposed to be saved, but then it didn't, but then it ultimately transforms you over time. It's something that's very like transformative in ways, but it's deeply felt, and it's not always even in the conscious eye, which is why I've always had like, I'm still actually understanding it. And I think I said this maybe in the first episode, but I do think that there's something to be said about interpreting astrology in general over the course of your life versus just like right in this moment. Like who me and Kate are right now, we can interpret all the houses and we can interpret everything, but it will change over time because we will experience new transits, and we will experience new things in the houses that will give way to what these actually mean. And I would say the 8th house is to me where this stands out the most. So yeah, I would say it's the transformation of your relation to the other and the outside world and what you value. In short, yeah.
Absolutely, transformation. Like, yeah, I think I just like go deeper into transformation whenever I think about the 8th house. I'm like, what does transformation feel like? What does it look like? And to me, 8th house is like, I mean, it's the scorpionic energy of like composting the dirt and the shit, and then like growing out of that again, and like the life, death, rebirth cycle, life, death, rebirth, or life, death, rebirth, like constant letting go, releasing, and living anew, and like living into this new skin. And like, I feel like transformation is the fucking headline of my life. It really is. So I feel like I relate to the 8th house a lot. And I'm a Scorpio sun. Liz is Scorpio rising. I feel like we have a lot of that like energy here within this relationship, in this sisterhood, this podcast.
Yes.
I wrote down for 8th house, other people's money is a big one. Like you said, like when you get a grant or something, it's like taxes, it's other people's money. It's how you transform and how you give and receive, giving and receiving fully, and then being able to give and transforming within that process. Transformation, grief is a big one. And how you let yourself or allow yourself to feel grief. It's really the depth of feeling. It's like feeling deep things. And it's also the phrase, the only way out is through. That's what I think of too when I think of 8th house. It's like, you got to feel it to release it. You got to feel it to, believe it. You got to feel it to blank. Like feeling. That's what it is. Like, yeah. And if you have planets here, that speaks to your capacity to feel or your aversion to feel. Like it can speak to so many things. I know from personal experience, I have Chiron in the eighth house.
Mm,
And I think that's why my experience in this life has been so transformative and focused on transformation, is because like
mhm.
Chiron, which is the wounded healer, has this energy about it that is helping other people transform, helping myself transform, being seen. Like being seen for me is a huge one. I struggle with being seen, and I transform and I grow through
Mm,
being seen. So that's my lesson from the eighth house.
yeah. Sorry
So
to cut
yeah,
out.
no, that's okay. Let's go to the ninth house. So the ninth house, I immediately think it's ruled by Sagittarius. It's travel. The ninth house really, I think, resonates with my life.
Oh
It's
yeah,
travel. It's culture. It's
teaching.
it's teaching. It's learning. It's new languages. It's experiencing other parts of the world. What you learn from being there, and how your self expression and your inner dialogue shifts when you learn new things. And then the teacher student relationship, being a disciple, being a it's also like the sign that can be categorized like where gurus would be under. I don't love the word guru, but like there's so many of them nowadays that like that's the energy of the ninth house, is like true guru energy, like teacher, like spiritual teacher. And there are also, I think, cults live under this,
Mm,
like cult behavior. Cults can live under the ninth house.
yeah.
But we're talking more like we are turning towards like what feels resonant for us and like what is positive in each house.
Hmm.
That's why, side note, I don't love like fatalistic astrology where it's like, watch out because this transit is coming, or like this house represents secrets and hidden death. Like, sure, it can, but like, why not focus on like the good aspect of each house, and whatever is bad can be transmuted into good because
Yeah,
here to we are
and
here to transform.
nothing is good nor bad. It just is what it is. Like that's kind of like what I believe too, especially just about life, like and astrology and how you can interpret things like this.
Yeah. So yeah, teachers, philosophy, cosmic law is another one I'm obsessed with. Cosmic law is big in the ninth house. So it's just like, it's also representative by Jupiter. It's expansion. It's the quantum field. It's like understanding quantum physics and the field of possibilities, and like what is possible for you in this life can be like channeled by the ninth house and by what energy rules your ninth house.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have Jupiter in the ninth house. I feel very,
Ooh,
very expansive and blessed when I learn new things. And I've stepped into the role of teacher, and that has been really transformative for my life.
wow. We have a mutual reception, I think,
What is
because
it?
you have Jupiter in the ninth house. I have Jupiter in Sagittarius.
Oh, yes. Where's Sag? What house for you?
Second, yeah,
Ooh,
yeah. What is the
interesting.
zodiac sign ruling ninth house for you?
Libra.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. Like how you interpreted that. I can see that in a Libra
Yeah,
lens in a way.
yeah.
The only thing I guess I really wouldn't add much to that, other than I feel like just a very like just an example, like the ninth house could also represent like somebody of wisdom in your life, like as a teacher, but or
Hmm.
like even just like an elder in the family who like teaches you a lot. That's very like ninth house.
Hmm.
And also, I do feel like it kind of blends into, which I believe for all the houses, they all blend into each other. So the ninth house, I think, also gives way to your to not your legend but your legacy, and like
Yeah.
so. if you think about it, it's like we are educating ourselves. We're in a Jupiter ruled house. We're fire. We're mutable. We're learning with like ignite. We're igniting our passions here, and we're learning to expand a mindset. And I think it gives way for the 10th house ultimately, which I guess we'll just go right into. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, the 10th house is Capricorn rules, which is Earth, Cardinal, just starting out with just those little details. But it is also the switch over from the MC, right? It's on the opposite side of the MC. So when we're talking about the switch between the ninth and the 10th house, I feel also like I really understand these houses. Um,
Yeah.
it's like you have learned and you've expanded. You've been in the world of the other now because you're on the other like hemisphere or whatever, and you are now living your legacy. You're building the thing that you have come all this way to do. And this is very much this place in the sky is at noon, wherever you were born. So it's right in the smack dab in the middle of the sky. So it is like the highest point of the sun. I don't know exactly what it means in Latin. I'm sure you do. But it is the
I don't
place
know.
of what you are known for. And I guess a really cool thing if you do know David Lynch at all, which is just funny. I'm wearing this today, but David Lynch has his moon on his MC, like smack dab on his MC, and what he's known for is he's known for directing very obscure, weird, awesome, but like hard to understand because it's like a whole world. But he's known for directing these things that have very moon um, themes and qualities and just feelings. Like it's very all about intuition. It's all about like what you feel, and it's just it's a beautiful thing when you see a planet or some sort of very benefic, whether it's like benefics, the planets like Jupiter and Venus, and I guess the moon, but moon can be both, I guess, malefic or benefic. But when you see a planet near the MC or in the 10th house or like anywhere along this little section here, it's what you're known for. It's I think where you shine the most. Like I would say when yeah, it's like it's what you shine in. So that is also like what you've accumulated over time, like what you know best, what you do best. 10th house, yeah, so it's structures, it's like what you've built, it's what you stand on, it's how you interpret the world, it's how you, I guess, like go about building your own legacy. So yeah, I and a lot of people relate it to career, which makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
You see a lot about like what you what you can do. Like I guess a way that I used to do this is I would look at the 10th house and I'd be like, what does this mean for like what direction I should go in my career?
Yeah.
And it, I guess it can help, but like you obviously just want to know if there's any like challenging placements there and how that can help and have obstacles. But I guess that's how I would interpret the 10th house.
Yeah. I really love the 10th house. Capricorn energy. Love Capricorn energy. Yeah. I mean, career is the big like popular term to describe the 10th house. But it's so much more than career. It's not just like what you do and like what company you work at. Like you're not going to get the answer of like what company I'm going to work, what am I going to do with my life? Like if you look at your 10th house, it's more of like yeah, your legacy, like your prosperity,
Mm-hmm.
your expression, your offering into the world, whether that be like you're the best mother like you could ever imagine, or you are like an abstract painter, or you're like a wildlife photographer, or you're like a sex worker. Like that's, and it's like your expression, your work. I love the 10th house because it can speak to so many different things. Like it's right on the MC. It's the ninth to the 10th, like what Liz said. And the MC, I think one more thing about the 10th house is like, I've heard an astrologer speak of it as the MC is like the target point of your life, like where the arrow is pointing, and it's the bullseye of like where you're trying to get to, and you reach it eventually, and you bring your essence into the world, and it's like boom, that's me, that's the mark I've left. And it doesn't have to be that too. Like, it doesn't have to be like, you need to like leave a mark on the world, like all this pressure. It's really like leaning into what you offer people, what you offer others. And it can be career, it can be through career, it can be through another medium. Yeah, professional roles and your public roles is also what I wrote. Yeah, okay, so let's go into the 11th house. Two more left. So the 11th house is representative of Aquarius energy. We're in Aquarius season right now, so we can kind of feel into it a little bit, like it's accessible to us right now. The sun is there. Aquarius in the 11th house, I think of networks. I think of groups of humans that believe in the same thing. I think of activism. I think of your community, like your small community and your larger global community, if you have that connection. And then like what you believe in, and like the movements that are a result of what you believe in collectively. The collective is a big word with the 11th house, like the collective consciousness, what's happening in the global discord, like what's happening in the collective consciousness currently, like what's present in this thing that we're all connected to, like this hive mind that we're all a part of. Like I think of like mycelial networks, like the magic of mushrooms, and like neurology, and like the different networks of our brain, but also the networks that we're connected to with each human that we know, and like the web that we create together and support. Your hopes and desires is something that's very 11th house. And how you can like impact a big group of people through similar hopes, dreams, ideals.
Yeah. Yeah. I would also just add, like, Aquarius is all about like humanity and what is good for the collective. So I feel like it is, when we're talking about the change from the 10th house to the 11th house, we're still kind of working in the groups of people. Now we are relating to the other so much. We're at the precipice of like the most relating to the other, I think. Like, because when we think
Yeah.
about it, it's the most way that we can relate to another. And I don't know why, I'm just thinking of our mom is an Aquarius, and she could have a conversation with anybody, you know?
Anyone.
So it's like the precipice of human interaction, and how, like, I think it's a bit more, if we're talking Capricorn and the 10th house, it's not so much like building something to like be successful and legacy. It's more like,
Yeah.
how can we think outside of the box as a collective? And it's like the Aquarius knows that we're better together. So how do we go about making this change together? But let's be creative about it, and let's be a little bit more progressive. Let's do something new that hasn't been done before. Let's like let's brainstorm, because we're in an air sign. And yes, we're fixed. We're gonna use all the systems that already exist, but let's like think outside the box and be rebels, and like make something just and like make way for us, you know.
Yes.
And yeah, friend groups, friendships. I would say is another thing here that I see a lot in my chart. is the 11th
Yeah.
house.
Yeah. One more thing. What was I going to say? Yeah. Like rebellion. I think of like revolution when I think of that. That happens in the 11th house is revolution.
Yes.
And because Saturn is still in Aquarius, but just kind of passed through Aquarius and will be entering Pisces soon. This precipice that we're talking about is actually really important for this upcoming year. So we're going to talk about that in our next podcast or in some upcoming podcast,
Mm-hmm.
the upcoming transits for 2023, which
Yes.
will include a lot of planets entering Aquarius, or actually just
Pisces.
important planets entering Aquarius and Pisces.
Yes.
So we'll talk about that, but big shifts, like collectively, is Aquarius energy. And we're
Yeah.
going to be feeling a lot of that this year, which I'm like excited about. And I'm just like, whoa, about.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to the 12th house and then we can like close it out with something else. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the 12th house is, we're talking about Pisces energy. We're talking about mutable, all the things that represent Pisces, which is music, the creative arts, and ethereal dreams, the imagination, but also more of the unconscious mind, the unconscious life and lives that we lead in our unconscious. The things that are a bit more under the scene, not really there, but could, like, for instance, it's like if you're in a room with somebody and you're just talking to them, what's the unseen thing is the mental processes. So like sometimes here you can see like mental things come up, or the hidden peaks and valleys of like the inner world. And yeah, so I would say the 12th house is very representative of the, also the thing, like the things in society that aren't really at the forefront, um, that tend to be a little bit more like almost not like brushed off, but like I've heard people say like prisons and
Yeah.
mental wards are like places that are very 12th house. But I think ultimately what people are trying to say is it's the things in life, the people or the conditions in life that connect us to a realm that is outside of our own. So that is ultimately what Pisces is like the connection to the other realm, the spiritual realm. So in this place, you could probably imagine certain placements like the sun, or certain placements that have a bit of more shine and a bit more benefic can have a hard time here. Um, but you can also learn great lessons, and you can. I feel like it's a place of superpower though. So even if you do have a planet that isn't in like isn't in the greatest shiny spot, glittery and gorgeous, it could still give you a really creative angle or edge, or it could give you just a way of seeing life through the lens that normal people wouldn't. Um, and yeah, I think that's my interpretation.
I love that. That's really good, Liz. I love that. 12th house is really special to me in a specific way because it's all about like the subconscious and how we work through our subconscious blocks, our belief systems that we've had since childhood that we like don't want anymore. It's like about, it's really where unlearning takes place. So we we go into the 12th house of subconscious belief systems, hidden motives, all these things that like are unseen. And we can like bring light there when we have a 12th house transit, when we have planets in the 12th house, we're bringing light. We're bringing some sort of light there into that space. And that's where we can do so much creative work, where we like let go of some bound up creative energy. We come into a space of no ego, which is that's kind of popular in like the yoga community, is coming into this space of where there's no ego. That's the 12th house, is like, there's no me, there's no we, there's no self. I am just consciousness, and consciousness is connected to everything. Pisces, it's like it's like living in the soup of what is and the
Yes.
energy of everything. Yeah, it's the last one. It's the last sign, the last house of the zodiac, and it can be where a lot of like deep pain is held, and it is so powerful to go into those spaces and places, bring a little bit of light, feel safe enough to like bring some light into that space, and then like bring awareness there, and then we can like start to rewire our brains and release creative energy, and like all the creative arts I think come from the 12th house a lot of the time,
Yes.
because it's something that's so integrated in the body, and it's like held. I think of like the body keeps a score, and my trauma work, and how releasing trauma from the physical body and from the brain stem, our nervous systems, how we interact with the world around us. I could speak about that for hours. But
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Um,
that, yeah, that's the 12 houses.
yes.
Anything
And
you have to say?
I just want to say one last thing. So when we're like on this journey, so we just made it through the winter with all of the other themes and like the way you relate to the world. But then I just find, like you said, it's so special, the 12th house and Pisces energy, and how it like closes out by just saying, here we are in our soul. Like this is our soul. And here's what you can do with your soul. So that's all I would really add to the 12th house.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
So beautiful. That was like quite the journey through the houses.
yeah,
So, next, we'll probably pin this episode.
yes,
And our next episode, I think, will be about the transits that we're going to see in 2023, like what we're going to see this year. And we're already like a couple months into it, but there's a lot happening. So, we're going to get into that. And yeah.
yeah. Super excited for that. And then yeah, we're probably gonna just continue on, and we'll probably do some more teachable episodes, but also some just forecast episodes that are about the current times and current transits that we can expect to see,
Yeah.
and yeah, things like that.
Yeah. And so let us know in the comments what you want to hear from us, what you liked, maybe what you didn't like, and we will maybe answer some questions that you have in the next episode. So we will see you next time. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Ciao.